Okay, yay. And welcome back to the Blacc Tea Podcast. I will be your host for this episode, Janelle. I am so excited to be here with everyone today as we celebrate Black History Month. It is officially February. And to start us off, we have a special episode that we're doing today on the honor of Blue Diamond Growers. So, to get this started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's panel. And to the right of me, we have
Deirdre Robinson. I'm related to Janelle, so thank you so much for allowing us to be here. And also for Blue Diamond Growers, as they're celebrating Black History Month. It's so important for us, and we're delighted to be here and honored.
Yes. And I'm Ashley. Nice to meet you, Del. It's such a pleasure. And I am one of the co-hosts here on the Blacc Tea Podcast. Happy Black History Month. I'm really excited to talk about the history that has been erased and what reality actually is, and as far as our history.
Perfect. And I want to thank all of you, lovely ladies, for having me here. This is my very first podcast, so I'm very excited to share it on this special time to talk about Black History Month. Blue Diamond has done a really good job of educating our team members on the importance of Black history and really celebrating Black History Month annually. And so this kind of unique experience, I ran into Janelle and found out she had a podcast. Who knew? And here we are. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to not only highlight Black History Month from individuals from our past, but to also highlight Janelle and her podcast, because she's making Black history in real time. And so I think both things are true. And so hopefully we will have a really good discussion about Black history.
Absolutely. Thank you all again for joining me. So just to get it started, Dale had the brilliant idea to highlight some of the individuals within our Black community that some of us may not be aware of and how they've greatly impacted us as a whole. Some of them are actually local natives. So we could get started with our first individual from Oakland, California, Miss Doris Lucki Allen. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, because you did such a great explanation earlier of telling us about her and how she was involved in the Army's Intelligence Specialist Force. So tell us a little bit about Doris and why she should be highlighted in particular this month.
Yeah, so Doris Lucki Allen went down this journey looking for individuals that really made history, Black history, American history, that we really haven't heard about. And so Doris Lucki Allen was a war veteran. She signed up for the Vietnam War. So imagine that, as a Black woman, single Black woman deciding to join the war effort. And she focused in on military intelligence. And so that was her expertise. She ended up retiring as a Chief Warrant Officer 3. So she really worked her way up into a position. But what was interesting about Doris was that she, in that military intelligence, came across some information that the Tet Offensive was going to happen in Vietnam. And that was when the Viet Cong was going to launch a full-scale major attack during Lunar New Year. And she shared that information with her superiors. And of course, it fell upon deaf ears. That attack, of course, did happen. And several other instances where Doris had provided intelligence that were overlooked. But the one thing I appreciate about Doris and her story is her resilience. Although Doris was not taken seriously when she spoke about what was going to happen, she didn't let it stop her. So she continued, and she ended up providing detailed information about different military intelligence needs.
Nice.
So much so that she ended up in the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame. So can you imagine being a Black woman from Oakland and working in that arena, which was not only probably male dominated, but with no women, but also being a Black woman in this arena and rising to that ranks. She was featured in a book about 26 female soldiers in Vietnam, A Piece of My Heart. And so I encourage all of our readers out there at Blue Diamond to if you love history, a great book about 26 women who were pivotal during Vietnam, and Doris Lucki Allen's story is a part of that. So just an amazing outlook on life, respect. Her information is now contained in the Library of Congress. Can you imagine that? And so from this perspective, again, I had never heard of Doris Lucki Allen.
Neither did we until you introduced us to her.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what? I appreciate what you just said, Dale, in the sense that you mentioned Black history is American history.
Yes.
Often, so many times, when the celebration of Black history resonated across the world, or really across the world in the United States, we always celebrated because we had our own, but we knew about it. But I was often asked, why do we designate February to honor Black History Month? And it's because sometimes we don't get the voice. Sometimes it's whatever, we were just talking about that, whatever's going on in the media will diffuse some information, and rightfully so, because maybe it has a greater priority. But I like the fact that you highlighted that Black history is American history. And I'm impressed with the fact that she earned 3 Bronze Star medals for valor in the combat zone that she volunteered to go to. Because at that time, there weren't a lot of Black women going into the military. And certainly there were a lot of us here that were protesting, during the 70s, that kind of thing. I remember in the 80s, war and why are we there and that kind of thing. The fact that she, had, as you said, the resilience, but fortitude, bravery on so many parts to go and do this. And even when told no, she kept on serving her country by letting them still know, despite how they treated her, despite what went on for her personally, because life is always lifing.
Right.
Right? Life is always lifing. So we can't pretend like she didn't have a regular life, like this was life. Okay? This is she's a woman. And so I'm really impressed with that. And the fact that she actually graduated from the prisoner of war interrogation course in the Army Intelligence School. Those are important to highlight too. She just didn't jump up and go. She received the training, which requires your ability to focus on a work or a study and to make sure you're good at it. So thank you for bringing her to light. I'm impressed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to add too, I really like how it was emphasized, can't remember if it was on or off camera, that people did not really want to hear what she had to say because of who she is. And I think that is so relevant in our society. Sometimes it's not necessarily like who it is that said it. Or it's who said it, but they didn't really focus on what was said. So I think if we even bring it to the election and how someone could be completely qualified and they're saying and proving that they can do that, but then they have an image of who they want it to come from. So I think it's in a way history is repeating itself. And I just wish that as a society that we could overcome having this specific image of how the information, who's supposed to present the information.
Exactly. And I think, this is why we do this. This is why your podcast is so important. This is why the celebration of Black History Month is so important, because people need to realize and see that as Black Americans, we have contributed greatly to this country's success. Greatly to this country's success. And so from this perspective, they looked at her, like you said, as a Black woman. Why would we take that information seriously? It proved out her resilience as she continued to share that information. So at the end of the day, I think the ancestors are always pushing us forward by
Absolutely.
helping us understand that we need to continue. And that's the one thing I take away from Doris, if anything, is that she continued despite everything that was against her.
I think that was my greatest takeaway when I was reading her story. It was just impressive because I could only imagine at that time, you have all these different strikes against you, mainly being a Black woman as the main event of her not being able to be heard. But I think it was also reminiscent of me listening to my grandfather and how his experiences was, because he was also in the military himself, and constantly he actually really wanted to fly planes. That's all he really wanted. And they would deny him every time. It's not that he was not qualified. It's not that he didn't pass the test. They would just, simply because he was Black, no, sorry.
3 times.
3 times until he finally was able to fly those planes. And that's really, and it's interesting because it's almost, we become so selfish because at the end of the day, he just wanted to serve his country. That was his main focus. And I feel like with Doris, that was her main focus too. I just want to help. And I think oftentimes that message does get lost. But I'm hoping that as time goes on, and now that we have other platforms such as this one to be able to share these stories, that people really start to listen with intention to one another, especially for those who are actually qualified in those positions. Listen to those individuals, or even the ones that you may not necessarily always go to. I think that was my greatest takeaway with her story. It was extremely impressive. So
you make a great point too about qualifications, right? Because that's really on the radar right now. People's qualifications. And you talked about our vice president ran for president, her qualifications. She was more than qualified, right?
And she was from Oakland.
So it's kind of...
Yeah, full circle. But qualifications matter. Doris Allen worked to have and to display the qualifications. Your grandfather worked to display
the qualifications,
right? So we're having this qualifications discussion about people that are qualified, right? So you think about it from that perspective. So again, I appreciate her example because of the resilience, but because she provided the qualifications.
Absolutely.
You can't cast her as a product of some DEI perspective, right?
Absolutely.
She earned what she had done, and it proved out in the end because she's in the Library of Congress, right? And
I think DEI is the new catchphrase. It's a catch. We always have to have a catchphrase to believe in, but the people that benefited most from DEI are women of all cultures.
Absolutely.
Why we identify DEI with just being Black doesn't make sense.
It benefits.
It doesn't. It benefits women. And at this point in time in the Vietnam War, there weren't a lot of women in battle. Okay. We see a lot of women in the military now. And the fact that she rose to be a chief warrant officer says a lot already within itself. And I'm wondering, I often think when I read about people with this type of courage, if I was ever faced with something like that, what would I do? I can tell you right now, I wouldn't have volunteered. I'm gonna keep it real.
I think it's we grew up in such different times, so
Definitely.
For them, it's an honor. It was an honor.
I think it's an honor too. It's I have friends that are in law enforcement. I have friends that were in the FBI. Those are all honorable. But then I have friends that taught in a classroom. Honorable.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to volunteer to go to war. And that means volunteering to risk your life. You know that you may not come home. Preparation for you is to make do with family members because you will not come home. Can you imagine that? I got to make sure my insurance is in order. I have to make sure these things are in order. If I don't come home, that my family members, your wife, your husband is good, your kids are good. There are women that are doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you on informing us about Miss Doris Lucki Allen, veteran, war hero, and as he mentioned, Military Intelligence Hall of Fame member now. This is going to tap us into our next individual. We have Nathaniel Colley, who was actually an attorney. And from Alabama, which I have family members out there. I'm just interested to hear your take on why you chose Nathaniel.
Yeah, I chose Nathaniel, and I think the thing that I love about Black history is the time period. So think about this. He was born in 1918 in Alabama, in a segregated Jim Crow era of Alabama. And this man, youngest of 6 brothers, graduates from Tuskegee and then serves in World War II, reached the rank of captain in the Army. Remember, the Army is still segregated. That's an officer. And then he goes to Yale.
Impressive.
And again, 1946, think about the times, right? And when you put that into perspective, so when I saw his information come up, I was blown away because, again, the time period, what he achieved. He received the Benjamin Sharp Prize for the best original essay written by a third-year law student. So he wasn't just making it or getting through. He actually excelled at what he did. And so that's why Nathaniel caught my attention. And then when he came to Sacramento in 1948, he joined the NAACP, and he helped from a legal aspect, helped the organization to navigate what was going on here in Sacramento. But the other thing, and this is the important takeaway for me about this individual, he used the gifts and the blessings that he had to assist others, right? But those gifts and blessings that he helped others with didn't just help the Black community. They helped people of all colors, of all ethnicities, of all financial status, right?
Absolutely.
So he helped pave the way for others to benefit from a housing discrimination perspective. Because in California at that time, you could discriminate in housing against minorities, right? And so obviously that didn't just translate to Black people in Sacramento. It affected other people as well, even probably poor white individuals in that area. What he did helped everyone, right? And so that's what I appreciate about Nathaniel Colley.
I enjoy it. Well, I'm going to let you speak.
Okay. Well, again, I look at this attending Tuskegee Institute, a historically Black college. I've had a conversation recently with someone that didn't recognize or knew nothing about HBCUs. And when you use the terminology HBCU, they go, what does that mean? And one of the things that I talked about in talking about the Greek organizations, because I'm a member, Ashley's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It was founded 117 years ago. We just celebrated Founders Day. And when I was telling someone, they were like, well, and it was founded on the campus of Howard University. I'm boasting about it.
Right.
What college is that? And you had colleges back then? Well, yeah. And our presidential candidate, most recent one, the Democratic, that I'm talking about, Kamala Harris, she went to Howard University. And I'm trying to explain to you that you didn't know about Howard. Then I'd have to say, well, I know parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents that were living in Alabama and went to Alabama A&M. There's so many.
There's a long history.
Yeah, or HBCUs across the country. And it doesn't mean that only Black people can go to a historically Black college. I mean, everybody can go and get the education. It's education. Yeah, it's where you choose to go. But the richness of what an HBCU can bring, and one such as Tuskegee, who has always been involved in engineering and science as I know it, they should have run to get him. And then he went to Yale. So the transition, you're able to be matriculated into a higher degree program to one of the most prestigious. You don't have to worry about trying to figure out what career path you'll have if you attend Yale, right? And we know that. Everybody wants Yale on their resume.
Well, I think it's also more or less to the fact that that means he most likely had to work twice as hard to get into Yale.
Well,
Three
yes, to get
times
into
as hard.
Yale. Well, sometimes I'm saying this, and this is Black History Month, so and not to sound like I'm against Black History Month, but what I'm saying is a lot of times you'll find you have a champion. There are other people in there that help support this cause that are not Black. Okay. And I think about it from my dad's perspective. He did go to flying school or whatever school he had to go to after leaving college and then going to officers' candidacy school. He is an officer, but he can't pass the course to get him in a plane. So he came back the next year and he took it. The same instructor is there, the same people that are in charge of the program. Then the third time he came back, they just said, we're just going to pass you because you're up here teaching the other people. What are we doing here, right? But it's the fact that he didn't stop because he was passionate about it. So in other words, we perpetuate and move on. And that's exactly what he did. But I'm impressed with him because Governor Pat Brown appointed him to the California State Board of Education being the pivotal point of what we're discussing now, getting the message out about who and what you can become, who you are, and what you are is based on your passion.
Right. Also God's purpose too. Because
absolutely.
I believe like all odds can be against you. You could be a Black man. I believe it was either Booker T. Washington saying the most dangerous person in this world is an educated Black man.
That's right.
And I do think that with that being said, getting to that place where you have a lot of odds against you, when God has a plan for you, nothing can stop you from reaching that.
Absolutely.
And you have to put your faith in God, just like Attorney Colley did.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And you are so right about that. It's God's plan. He's in charge.
God's plan. No wrestling, no arguing. So it's him.
But I appreciate you saying that because God's plan means that we have to put the effort in, right? Yes. And so these two individuals that we've talked about to this point, they put in that effort, right? And then God blessed that plan. Yes.
And I like how they're still influential. Even, I know we talked about my grandfather briefly, but what a lot of people don't know, even after he retired from the military, he still continued to work in the government. He worked for HUD for a number of years, retired from HUD, and then opened his own consultancy business as a result of it, still trying to fight injustices where people were not being served in the manner in which they should in the housing development area as well. So the fight never stops. It always continues. But even throughout a lot of these individuals we're discussing, especially with Nathaniel, he never stopped either. And it was the same with Doris. And I like that approach that now that I've gotten to this place, what else can I do that's going to help benefit my community?
Yeah, no, that is a great point. Because he talked about how he even taught law school afterwards, right? Mentored other.
And he didn't have to. He could have said, I'm done.
Yes. I love that. I just want to say too is the next podcast, we need to have your grandfather on.
We'll try. Here's Miss retired Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, who I love dearly. He is 93 years old. He unfortunately does have dementia. So trying to get him out the house is tricky. But
if you go to the house, that's another story.
He will talk.
Yeah.
If you go to that, and he would love that.
He's sweet as pie.
Yeah, I was with him all day yesterday out at the VA and just driving him around Travis Air Force Base and saying, he goes, I know that building. I know that. He recognized that and really enjoyed it. We didn't, 6 miles from the house, we didn't really go anywhere. But for him, just going down memory lane, and I took him to a place where he used to exercise. It's called the Duck Pond, and he used to walk around the Duck Pond. It's a park.
Wow.
And he was like, I remember that. He goes, first they said, we never came out here. And then the next thing, my mom's 92, she was with us. And then she came back and said, you know what? We did it in the morning. I said, there you go.
There we go.
Yeah, but just remembering it. And then we went to one of the Delta Breeze, which is a place where people gather for food, events, things like that. And my dad said, well, I want to go to, they used to have separate places, Officers Club, NCO Club, Airmen's Club. All of it's in one. He said, I want to go there. So we ended up going. And I remember talking to him, like, I bet you if you mention Mr. Colley, he probably may come back and say, I know who that is. Because he was stationed at Mather in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. And that may be something we could share and pull out of him too, because there's certain things that he'll pull back up in memory. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he is definitely American, Black American history.
Right. He's quite a character. Yeah. Quite a character.
I'll tell you.
But I like how through generations that same fight still continues, because people always assume that, well, we've already, progressed enough. We could stop. I'm like, no, we don't need to stop. There's a little bit more work that we could always do. And I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm excited so you have to tell me how you found these next individuals we're going to discuss, because this is my genre right here, because they're in the entertainment industry. So the Hyers Sisters, we have Miss Anna Hyers and Emma Hyers, who were opera singers and entertainers. So you have to tell me how you learned about them, because this is my first time even hearing their names.
Listen, this is the one thing. It's frustrating on one hand, but it's also exciting on the other hand. Because you got to dig deep.
Right.
You got to really, really dig deep. The fact that these Black women were from Sacramento or lived in Sacramento, but the fact that they were, again, the time frame in the 1800s, talented operatic singers, entertainers, you just got to scurry around to find Black history. But when you find it, it is such a blessing.
It's insightful.
It's so insightful. And so these two sisters were managed by their father. And imagine again, 1872, they're traveling to the World Peace Jubilee to perform in Boston, and then coming back and making their own musical productions. These women traveled the world singing in operas, in plays, in shows, and then created their own outlet. And of course, just like the others that we mentioned, they took the time to, when it was their time to shine, to focus on the struggles of our community, right? And so that, from that perspective, they were like, you know what, we've been blessed, we've accomplished a lot, but there are two plays, Underground Railway and Out of Bondage, focused on the struggles of Black Americans. And so they took their gifts and their talents, and they used them to propel stories about Black Americans. So again, the time frame, though,
of how they had to, because you mentioned that they performed in the Jubilee, and I was just looking up that was the first featured interracial performances that they had for that particular production, correct?
Yes.
So there, again, when you have all these different factors that at that time probably were mostly against you, and still being able to persist and not only perform, but then after the fact decide that I'm going to perform and now produce my own production. That's amazing. And I love that. I love hearing these stories because, like I said, I'm familiar with, certain entertainers like the Nicholas brothers. Those are my favorites. I love watching all their old movies. I like watching how they came from Philadelphia and they grew into this phenomenal duo that now, other people even talk about them today, from Michael Jackson to Prince, Janet Jackson, who've inspired all these now major icons. But when you hear about all these other performers at that time or even prior to that time and how they've had to push, it kind of connects the dots as to, okay, how did we get the Nicholas brothers? Who else came before them?
Exactly. Think about that.
And we have the Hyers Sisters.
Yes.
So I'm like, well, I'm blown.
But think about the level of talent that they had, right? So they had to be extremely talented individuals to get to that point, to open that door. You brought up the Nicholas brothers, and I just want to relate this quick story I saw on YouTube. Ted Lange, who was on the Love Boat, he was Isaac, he was the bartender, and he was reflecting he had Gene Kelly, guest on the show one time, and everybody told him, don't talk to Gene Kelly. He doesn't like to be disturbed. He doesn't like to be bothered. And he said, I'm going to go talk to this man. And so he said he went to sit down and talk to him. And he said, hello, Mr. Kelly. And Mr. Kelly was reading a paper. And he said you could see he was perturbed, that he didn't want to talk. And he said, I just want to ask you one question. And he said, what was it like to dance with the Nicholas brothers? And he said, Gene Kelly's eyes just lit
He
up.
loved them.
Because, and he said he just probably thought he was going to ask him about Singing in the Rain, which he was famous for, but probably had been asked about that
Multiple times.
And he looked at him and he said, what are you doing after this? Let's go have a drink. And so they sat down and he talked to him about the Nicholas brothers. He said they were just two amazing, incredible individuals. And so this whole story blossomed out of that. But that reminded me of that story when you brought up the Nicholas brothers. And to your point, these women probably helped pave the way.
They propelled, yeah.
For the Nicholas brothers.
One of the things that really stands out to me too is where they were performing. They weren't traveling on the Chitlin circuit, going from the South. They were in Troy, New York. That was their beginning. And so there's already a sense of somewhat acceptance. Would we agree? It wasn't met with the volatile threat of death that would have happened had they crossed the Mason-Dixie line. And to think that someone would be interested, I almost can hear their voices now, singing opera, and you would want to miss out on that beautiful melodic tones that they could produce because of your inability to conceive, to dream, to be resilient other than in your own ignorance, if you will, to hear something that was beautiful. And I'm glad that someone recognized them, and I'm glad that they were in Sacramento.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that we're talking about them today because they had a talent to share, and it should have been brought to light. Sometimes, and I'm not opposed to it because I listen to all kinds of music and appreciate the artists and the era in which it was developed. But I also am concerned about only highlighting the Black community, or not even just Black community, but a certain genre of music as that being the best that there is, and paying them a lot of money to do so. I'm not taking away from their talent or what they do or the fact that they're being paid. Get your coin. That's what you do. But the bottom line is that you've ignored other aspects of a culture that went on not only in Black America, Black history, California history, New York history, Baltimore, Massachusetts history, and now that makes us American history.
Right.
I'm done.
Beautiful. Mic drop.
It irritated me a little bit to talk about, have to say that, but that's what I was picking up from the conversation and where they were. And I think sometimes it goes back to, I keep talking about my dad in the military, but as we traveled in the military, we always had to map out where we were going to be, where we were going to stop, who we contacted, who knew where we were. We never drove at night. We're moving, and he's in the military, and we have to travel from one base to the other. It's very carefully plotted out where we knew. When we got to the base, we knew who to contact. Not report for duty. We knew who to contact to protect us and make sure that we were safe because somebody went before us.
Which also could be part of the reason why their father managed them.
Exactly. And stayed with them.
For protection, for sure.
Kind of reminds me of that movie. I got a flashback of The Great Debaters. Did you all see that movie?
I love that.
When they were traveling,
Yeah.
across country, trying to, just debate, just wanting to go to Congress, wanting to be seen in oratory. They called those forensic courses that you're taking. Forensic, meaning that's to give speech, not cutting you up. But yeah.
What do you think, Ashley? Well, to piggyback off of how they traveled the world within talents, I just think what is that road to get there? And I don't have a lot to say about this topic, but it's kind of all in the same line of when something is meant for you, if you have a God-given talent and have to do it. And And it really goes to the deeper purpose. Sure, it was uncomfortable, I'm sure, when they performed with interracial performers, because there's always that. But then there's also, in my opinion, this idea of what role does a Black person, what role do they play? Are they just entertainers in the eyes of those? So that did cross my mind as far as
different.
Yeah, if it's just Black people, if they're supposed to entertain the white audiences, is that the only way that it's appropriate in the 1800s for us to be able to, I guess, be? Or do they actually see their talent and their personhood?
I think it was more or less a segue, especially once they started creating their own productions, a segue for them to be able to tell their stories. Because I think at the time, again, we could go back to Doris, where you're not being heard. And sometimes people need to hear the word in a different way.
Yeah.
And through entertainment, people seem to tune in a little bit more. And I just would imagine that they saw this as an opportunity to now tell their stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think too, though, people try to water down certain aspects of the community, right? Because being an entertainer takes the same level of training, the same level of hard work, the same level of dedication, the same level of practice, resilience, right? And so I think from that perspective, I look at it and say, yeah, they probably were entertainers, but at the same time, we can't let history water down what they did because they were entertainers. Right?
Absolutely.
Because it took the same
still created an impact,
creativity, hard work to get where they were at. Again, given the time that it happened, right? Yeah. So just from that perspective, I just think we have to make sure, and this is why this is so important, because we will not allow history to be watered down, right? Simply because people say, well, they were just entertainers, right? They had a voice, and to your point, they used that voice once they got to a point where they could to share more.
Absolutely.
Just amazing.
And I agree with that. I'm not saying from the scope of what I was saying is just like, maybe if we go back to the attorney and going back to the Army intelligence professional, it might have been the role of like how like white people might have saw them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not as hard, because in my opinion, I think being an entertainer is probably just as hard, if not harder. But that might have been how they put us in this, because when we look at movies in the early 1900s, we were in comedic roles. We were the entertainer.
We still have the typecast,
so
for sure.
it was the typecast.
Exactly.
That's kind of where I was alluding to.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, this is going to roll us into Miss Mildred, who I think I'm going to have a soft spot for this because my grandmother was also an educator. So Sarah Mildred Jones, who was an educator, was the first Black woman principal of an integrated elementary school, which I know you have things to say. But Dale, tell us how you discovered Miss Mildred.
So again, on this search, I ran into Miss Mildred, and education, like everyone here, is important to me. And I firmly believe that education on some level can be an equalizer. Not a total equalizer, but it can be an equalizer. So it's always important, no matter where you're at in life, to be educated. And I know there's this refrain now that, well, not everyone needs to go to college. And on some level, I believe that. But critical thinking skills, college helps you develop that.
Absolutely.
Right? So you can learn how to work on a vehicle or something, but you need to have critical thinking skills. And I think college helps from that perspective. But what I took from her was that she understood how important building that educational foundation was. So she came to Sacramento, and California was struggling with integrating schools. And, they wanted to do the right thing, but they didn't know how to do the right thing. So she said, well, just give me this school, this building, and I'll take this building and I will start to educate these Black children. And then she eventually got another school because it was so overwhelming, the people that wanted to participate, to bring their children. Obviously, Black people wanted to educate their children, have get their children educated. But she realized and saw that education was foundational to growth for Black Americans in Sacramento. And so she pushed that. She ran into some headwinds, obviously, when the schools were going to be integrated and white students were going to be taught with Black students. But you said something earlier about other people helping or being part of, or champions. Yes, always a champion. And so these 98 local educators, when they determined that she was going to be principal, they were not Black, and they said, we're going to stand by this woman, and we're going to support what she, because she believes in education. And so they were her champions. And so I appreciate that. But again, just the fact, this time frame where she had come from, she came to California with a goal to help educate Black children. And the other great thing about her story is that even after her years of service as a principal, she continued to support education. There was a story about her after the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, collecting books and toys for the children who had been displaced from their homes, right? So they had something to read so they could continue to be educated. Just the thought process, just a fun example. And I love education. I think it's so important. And so when I saw Sarah Mildred Jones, I thought she has to be included.
Absolutely.
And just to give you a overview, there were so many people.
I'm sure.
I had to,
that list is long.
This is nothing.
We only got so much time, right? But I knew that I really felt that someone from with an educational background had to be highlighted.
Yeah.
And I often say that when we talk about champions is almost like having another credential or certification. And the fact that those are people that are true to the mission, true to education. This is what this is about, and the level of education that they're seeking and the way it's delivered to the audience. And those things are important to an educator. They weren't just collecting a paycheck, and that's why they were able to see that Sarah Mildred Jones was just one of them, but probably in a very different perspective because they weren't taught in the same way. So when you see something that's unique, usually that will draw you to it. And hopefully in a positive way, because sometimes it's a negative way. But I integrated schools, and I look at even my mother. She is an educator herself. Her parents before her were educators. And I remember things that I didn't particularly care for, which is when we visited my grandmother. And if you were in third grade, she had fourth grade books, and we had to come in from playing to get ready to get in fourth grade. But I also remember being in eighth grade and a teacher asking me to conjugate the verb to be. And I was like, we just learned that in fourth grade, and why are we doing that? And I'm the new girl in school, always. So I conjugated the verb to be, and I thought, we are in eighth grade.
I know.
And the teacher is just now teaching that. So it makes a difference to where you are and where you're coming from. And the fact that she wanted to make sure no matter where she was, that was her mission.
Right.
And it was the same as my mother, because I've done a bio on my mother. And when I did the bio, when I wrote it, she was the first Black in every school that she taught in.
Oh, wow.
And, I'm thinking when we went to
And
school,
started the Black Student Union.
Yeah,
right.
When we came to Fairfield, came to California, actually, she started a Black Student Union and was teaching us how to survive in a predominant, and not just Black kids of color. It was, I don't know what, we are Black and we accept being Black, but we associate with people that are not Black.
Right.
We have people in our lives that are not Black. And I think people miss that point sometimes, that actually happens. But we actually, she did a lot of firsts. There are a lot of people that are first and we can recognize, but having done integration, having been involved in that, knowing the risk, even when my parents asked us, our response was, okay, so now can we go back outside because the street lights are on? Because, you have to come in when street lights. Yeah. When the street lights are on, everybody comes in. I don't even have to say that. We know what that means. Everybody knows you have to come in.
Right.
But we are in, but we didn't get to play the full time. Can we go back out for another 10 minutes? And that's how we felt about it, because we knew that my brother and I were going to be the first. It was rough. We had some rough times, and we did it. And my mother was there on top of it. My dad was serving in Vietnam. Wow. Okay. So we were living for the first time off base in my life.
Wow.
And during that year, President Kennedy was killed. And we were sent home from school when he died. When he was killed, the principal, I remember this, on the intercom. You all remember intercoms? Did you guys have intercoms in school? So the intercom was in the room, and Mr. Owens is talking on the intercom saying that he had been shot and killed, and we're dismissing school for the day. That was the appropriate thing to do, to acknowledge. That's an educator. Because what did they do? They're teaching us in second grade, third grade, how to behave in a civilized society, and one that has a love for God and other people.
Right. Sorry.
And I guess I'm just wondering, as far as her experience goes, what it would have been like having to integrate a school. I've heard stories from you, but I can't imagine being I think I've never thought about it from an educator's perspective, what that was like, what that experience entails. Are you being taken seriously by the rest of the staff? Are your assignments being approved? How are the parents handling you? And the fact that she had such a big heart, like you said, to even still always focus on the children, even in the most dangerous of times where she's collecting books and toys, and that's her first thought in a dangerous situation such as an earthquake, just to make sure that the children are still being provided and taken care of. I think that just, when you think about educators, I always feel like they always have such a big heart. They don't get paid as much as they probably should, but to be a Black woman and integrating a school and being an educator, that's pretty impressive, especially for that particular time. So I appreciate you even bringing her to light.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing about that, because it's really important, and I'm glad you brought out. Not only was she integrating in schools, but she was denied public funding.
Oh my goodness.
So think about, from that perspective, no public funding, but again, it didn't stop her, because she saw the importance of education, saw the need, wanted to push forward. Just another shining example of our ancestral history of individuals who went above and beyond.
And educators, to this day, use their own personal funds.
Yeah,
they do.
To be able to provide the appropriate, adequate, in a timely manner, the needs for and resources for children. And the fact that she left Sacramento to drive an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, I can't remember, to San Francisco, and she wasn't driving, excuse me. She wasn't on Interstate 80. 1906. And I said an hour and a half. I don't know what. I just said that. No, because obviously that doesn't make sense, right? Yeah, she's making it down there and knowing that that was what the children need in order to be able to understand the chaos around them, to get them to focus on something else besides the chaos, and to keep the study going. Yeah. That's what educators do. That's what people that love people do. Right. And care about people.
And I'm reading here that she secured equal pay. How did she do? I just want to know how she did it. For that time period, that's impressive.
It's very impressive. I think of the servant leadership, what you were saying too, because she saw the need that we need representation. And I'm sure I can't speak for Miss Mildred Jones, but I'm sure she understood that if you see someone that looks like me, then the little kids in elementary school and beyond, they could see it's possible for them. And I like how she also established a toy department in San Francisco. Yeah. Because it's so, kids, sometimes they learn through toys. They're the most creative people possible. Kids are just amazing.
They learn through playing.
And I love how she also collected books as well for them, probably to bring home and to read, because who knows all the barriers of trying to separate the kids from actually learning.
And at one point in time, we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
So books were fundamental. They were highly valued.
Exactly. They were.
Exactly.
Oftentimes during slavery, hidden. Right. You could be killed for learning to read. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine saying, I'm going to cut school when somebody died or could be killed for wanting to learn, and we're given that opportunity. And I think it's important to handle that. I have to say this because this is what's popping up in my head, is there's a little girl in my life and she's 4. And her name is Zamia. And Zamia is
Highly intelligent.
But it's not just that. She's warm, she's loving, she's sensitive. And yes, she's really smart. But I know that she likes to play. So I love babysitting her. And when I'm babysitting her, everything we do is a game. To go to the bathroom, we march. To do this, we sing. To do this. And she loves that. I mean, absolutely loves. And she'll also say, Miss Dee Dee, where's my such and such? I go, oh my God, I wonder where it is. Oh, I know where it is. I'm surprised she remembers, you know?
Oh, she's
But she does always ask now, will you read me a book?
Oh, yeah. I know I did bring her. I love doing that. There were bedtime stories that were read to me, that I read to my children, and then I read to Zamia. And I do remember, this is funny to me, because one day I was babysitting her, and we were reading one of Dr. Seuss's books. Which one was it?
The Cat in the Hat.
The Cat in the Hat, that's right. And I'm reading it, and all of a sudden, as I'm reading it, I noticed that there's a page missing. I'm like, wait a minute. That's not how the story went. I said, is it? And I guess I stopped while I was talking to her. And so at the end of the book, so I said, Zamia, would you tell your mom and dad that thing 1 and thing 2 were in the room, that they came in the house? She said, yes. And I said, okay, well, it's good night. Then she starts crying. I go, why are you crying? Miss Dee Dee, I told the page came out of the book. It was total X-Men. she's letting me know. And I don't want to laugh, but I did want to laugh. Oh, it's okay, but it was hilarious to me. She's fussing. No, I did it. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. But anyway, but I've learned the art of playing. And I was thinking this morning, I also took my kids to go see the movie about you step on the crack, you break your mother's back. You know what it is. And I showed that to Zamia at a very early age about the dinosaurs.
Oh.
What movie was that?
The Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time.
Okay.
I love that movie.
The problem, though.
Zamia, I want you to see this movie. And I forgot that the dinosaurs were mean, right? And Zamia I'm just
like scary, like they were running for their lives. And for a 4-year-old, that doesn't always translate. Yeah. So,
and she's looking at me and she's serious. She's like, why did you? She was frowning. Her face was, she's, please, make it stop. And then Janelle said, Mom, she can't watch this, okay? Oh, okay. And then I thought about that this morning, how an educator would have known that was not the appropriate age. So sometimes you need people like Sarah, okay, coming in to straighten this out, because I was sitting there thinking, well, how come? Then I thought, well, I wonder what age my kids were. They probably weren't 4.
You're right, because educators do know and understand the developmental stages for children, so they know what's going to be appropriate versus what's not.
Yes. So anyway, I'm delighted in that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, as we're now ending the list of our individuals that we've discussed, and I do appreciate this conversation of how we could actually tie this into how they have impacted us today, even with some of the individuals that we have in our lives. So just as a takeaway, what do you guys think about all of these individuals that we discussed today and how they've impacted you, and how do you see them impacting you going forward in your day-to-day?
I guess I'll start. So hearing about everyone else's success, that really makes me feel more confident when I have those days where it's like, man, like, am I supposed to be here? The imposter syndrome. But this reiterates that when God has a plan for you, you are supposed to be there. And there are, even if it's a hard journey, just keep pushing through, just like the attorney did, the singer entertainment did, the educator did, the intelligence specialist did. It's all about the journey and the impact according to the purpose, because the purpose is greater than ourselves. And that's what I love about all of this is no matter what went on, everyone continued to have a purpose that impacted many, many people, all in California and beyond.
I think they knew what the mission was.
Yeah.
They knew the mission and they understood the mission. And I echo what you're saying.
Right.
And the thing is, and I'm echoing you because you always remind us that God is in charge.
Yeah.
But once you know what your purpose is, it makes you fearless. And they were fearless because they knew who was in charge.
Right.
I don't even have to be there to know that. I didn't have to live during their time. I know that that's the only thing that would have allowed you to go into this kind of situation, knowing what the potential danger was, knowing what the outcome was, knowing that you might get your feelings hurt and or more. And so, God is in charge.
God is in charge.
That is beautiful. Both sentiments were just amazing. So beautiful.
And I'm going to say for me, I have shut off the news. I have just tried to recoil so I could center myself because I was knocked over a little bit in November. I was really speechless, could not imagine where we're going and what we're going to do. This brings it back to what the mission is for me. And that's what I'm going to be pursuing. Because it's okay to get knocked down or get knocked back a little bit. Just recenter yourself again and then move forward. I'm wondering at what point in time they had to recenter and what was the challenge that caused them to have to I don't mean quit. I mean, I need to take a weekend. I need a day or a weekend. Like you're taking money, you know what I mean? I can maybe to refocus. Let me refocus.
But I think, just to piggyback, I do think confidence has a lot to do with it in a sense where, and we could talk about this generationally, where you didn't know any boundaries because as far as you were concerned, there were none. You could do whatever everybody else did. And I feel like the minute Black people in particular got the opportunity and the rights to do certain things, they were not going to hold back. So I could almost understand that, okay, now that I have this position, I'm not just going to quit. I've worked this hard to get here. Why would I just stop now? And I appreciate that. And even in my day-to-day practice, I have to kind of keep that in the back of my head, even with this podcast, because there were many times. There were times where I'm like, you know what? I don't know about this anymore. This might not be it. And for whatever reason, I'm still here doing this. No, I'm serious. There are times where people are like, well, when are you going to put another episode? I'm like, really? You want to hear another episode? So it was hard just to get through the first one. I'm like, people don't understand behind the scenes, but there is something that's driving me to continue to do this and to tell everybody else's stories. And what ended up starting out as something just very mediocre amongst a group of women ended up growing and expanding into something even greater. So now I'm sharing other Black history stories on our podcast while making Black history.
There you go.
So I love that. I'm going to continue that in the back of my mind now that I've heard their stories too, just to keep progressing forward. I love that.
And thanks so much again for the research, introducing these individuals, because I tell you, I had not heard
neither
of not one.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't even know where you begin. Tell us a little bit about that. I'm interested in
the research.
Your research process.
I think it's, it's just digging in keywords and, focus on
Google?
On Google, Googling, talking to other individuals as well, right? So my mom is 92. Yeah.
Your mom's 92?
My mom is 92.
Wow.
And so obviously she's lived a lot of life, right? And so I'm blessed to have her and blessed to have her in good health and in good spirit. But, she, as we have always done as a community, we've always passed down and shared stories, right, about our ancestors and how we got here and where we came from and why we're important and why we matter, right? And so you start with those folks. And so, I just asked her some questions about that to see what she had gained. And so she helped me down a little path, and you add that with a little Google. And then sometimes you just run across people. You say, oh, I'm working on something. Oh, I heard this. Mm-hmm. And it just happenstance, right? And so that's the whole process. But it's the point of being inquisitive. It started actually, and we won't get a chance to focus on him, but there was a Richard Davis who was a Army colonel, and he ended up in Sacramento, but part of an all-Black regiment in World War II. So again, segregated. And there's a little neighborhood magazine that comes to my neighborhood, and he was highlighted for Veterans Day. Oh. And I thought this was so beautiful, and I read the story. I emailed the person that wrote the story, and I said, could you please get me in touch with the family? I work for Blue Diamond, and I want to feature him in our Black History Month in February. And this happened in August. And a couple days later, his daughter contacted me and said, oh, you can come to the house and you can talk to him. It'll be beautiful. And then I meet Janelle, and then I text her back, hit her back again and say, can I get him on a podcast? Mm-hmm. And that would have been a little bit of a stretch, but I was so anxious to hear about him and about his story. And we lost him,
unfortunately,
probably 3 weeks later. And so I emailed his daughter and said, I understand what you're going through. If you'd still like to talk about him, please, we can meet and we can talk. It didn't work out. But that's some of the areas where the journey started. Doris Allen's information was in the San Francisco Chronicle obituary section.
Wow.
And so I'm doing research and looking and Googling and not getting the information. And what am I going to do? And I pick up the Chronicle that Sunday, and here's on the very front banner of the San Francisco Chronicle obituary is her story.
So I guess somebody's tapped you on the shoulder to tell you what your mission is.
Oh yeah, yes. Ashley,
how that happened.
I was being directed as to where to go and where to find information, and that's how it came about. But again, it's just putting in that work because it's important, and it's important to share. This has been beautiful, so I want to thank all of you for this time. It's just amazing. I would tell you, for me, what Black History Month means is to focus on our ancestral grit.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Our ancestors had grit. And they faced some of the most unimaginable things, but they continued because they had that.
It's that progression. I don't know what it is in this, but they have it. And I think they passed that down to us. And we just have to keep that in the back of our minds always.
I always say such are the atrocities of slavery. Mm. If you do something like that, you don't know what you open up a can of worms.
Right.
Big ones.
Well, on that note, no, exactly. But I want to thank you guys again for taking your time. Again, we're in February now. It's Black History Month for us to be able to celebrate this together. And again, thank you, Dale, for being able to include the Blacc Tea Podcast in Blue Diamond's Black History Month celebration. It really is an honor. I'm looking forward to what's to come, but I know after these discussions, I could definitely progress forward. And that's my biggest takeaway. So thank you guys again for today.
Thank you.
It was great. And thanks for ULX Studios and what they do for us.
Actually, speaking of ULX, Tony came up with a little small trivia for us to do before we finish up. But it's going to be eye-opening because I feel like some people already know these answers and some of us don't. So, and then this will be a fun fact for those who may not already be aware. So I know we've spoken about some individuals, some may not have already known that are locals in California, but we have some that should be well known by now. First question, who was the first African-American to play Major League Baseball? I'll give you a hint, we share the same last name.
Yeah, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Yes.
Jackie Robinson is the correct answer.
Okay.
Oh, see, we spoke about this briefly earlier. So what year was Juneteenth a holiday celebrating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans first celebrated? It was around... Okay, so when slavery ended...
1865.
There you go.
Right, yes, I'm sorry.
Our magical year.
Wow.
This one's a little bit harder. I don't know why you came up with difficult questions, Tony. Name one of the co-founders of the National Association for Advancement of Colored People.
The founders was Benjamin Chavis?
W.E.B.B. Du Bois.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which I did not know.
Ida B. Wells. I knew about those two. I don't know about any others.
Okay, so W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, Mary Church Terrell, Moorfield Story, Oswald Garrison Villard, and it says or Joel Elias Spingarn. Spingarn. Hopefully I'm not butchering these last names. I did not realize there were this many individuals that actually founded the NAACP.
I didn't know that either. I knew about the first two.
I was familiar with the first two.
I knew it was Du Bois that founded it because they didn't talk about Ida as being a founder. You know what I'm saying? They only talk about him being a founder, at least in my experience. And the fact that the association still exists, because they text me all the time and ask me for donation. I mean, they're still here and they're still doing what they need to do, you know, in our world.
Oh, this one of my favorites. And actually, I think we've actually watched her story before. I think they had it available in certain documentaries. You could catch it. But Madam C.J. Walker is known for her successful business. What industry did she revolutionize?
That's the hair care industry.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows there. That's some time.
That's absolutely. And if you have a Black woman in your life, you understand.
She knew what he would do to hair.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think it was interesting, too, if you look up her net worth for the time.
She was, as far as Black entrepreneur goes, especially as a Black woman entrepreneur, was like the head of the head. Yeah. She was making headway. She was making headways where most people were not.
$600,000 when adjusted, that's around $8 to $9 million in today's dollars.
I don't
C.J. Walker.
I believe it was higher than 6 to 8, 9 million. I'm sorry.
Black women spend so much on health.
We are the number one producer of hair care.
We're just being honest.
They just keeping that low. I believe it was 600,000.
Well, no, it's a representation of the crown. That's why it's so important.
Well, the valuation was, I think that's incorrect. They didn't do
but
that.
But I think for her time, though, I'm focusing on the time in which
600,000 was amazing during that time.
Exactly.
But the valuation of what it was today,
I think it's much higher.
Whoever wrote that in Google, you were minimizing that.
It's much higher.
Google can't be read all the time.
No, Google, that was incorrect.
All right, last question. This one's hard. The Double V campaign during World War II referred to victory against what two forces?
Well, World War II was Nazis. I know that part.
Right. There you go. So, victory against racism abroad, Nazism, and racism at home. Discrimination against African Americans.
Really? Is that what that stood for?
Yes. I didn't know these things. These are good questions, Tony.
But I really want to know a little bit more because what was done during World War II?
That's for our viewers to research.
Got it.
But no, I mean, sincerely, I think we have a lot I'm still learning. There's a lot to be learned about Black history as a whole. And I think that's why we have this month to explore all that we've accomplished and all that we're still accomplishing and who came before us to pave the way. That's why we have this month, so we can learn about all of these facts that we don't often talk about every day. It's a focus.
And I don't know if this will make if it'll be cut on the floor. It may end up on the floor. But I am making a comment about there was certain, and I won't say who because I'm not going to do that to the Blacc Tea or ULA.
Thanks, you.
I will say that there are certain retail outlets that used to honor Black History Month. And because of the scuttle that's going on about DEA, DEI, I'm sorry, DEI, they've decided not to. And one of them, I really enjoyed this and always supported them as a result of this, because you could go into the store and they would have Black designers for clothing, Black designers for home goods, but I'd never heard of. Now, I know Martha. Everybody knows Martha.
Yeah.
But not everybody would know some of the designers that are out there, whether it's even home goods, meaning they do interior design. That's kind of my thing. I love spending other people's money to decorate a room. And so interior design was one of them. And it's sad that the state of affairs in their not belief in self or a guide or higher power, that they folded and said they will no longer honor those.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. I think that really helps us to appreciate that as a community, we need to determine where we spend our dollars and who we spend our dollars with. Our ancestors went through so much, and they sacrificed for a promised land that they were not going to realize. And so for us now, we need to make sure we are doing right by their legacy and determining who and when we will share our resources, energy, money, and time. Thank you.
And I'll have that list should you want to put it on that I mean, just in case, I want you to know that I will provide that to you. And yes.
Well, before we wrap, I just wanted to say thank you again. I appreciate your time today, Dale.
Thank you.
This has been such a fun time and getting to know you. And also, if you guys want to check us out, please follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok at The Blacc Tea. And you could please also check out our YouTube page, also at The Blacc Tea, and our website with this awesome merchandise, www.blacktea.com. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.